Okay, so we're ready to start Unit 2. And this unit will be about chemistry. So our first topic in chemistry are elements. But before we get started with that, I want to review quickly about matter. This should have been covered in elementary school for you guys and make sure that you remember what this stuff is. So first of all, matter. Matter is anything that has mass and volume. So it's anything that takes up space. Mass is how much matter is in something. So we find this on a triple beam balance and we measure this in grams. It is different than how much something weighs, and we'll talk about that later. The mass is how much matter is in something. Volume is how much space something takes up. So if you have a baseball or a beach ball, they have different volumes, but the baseball is much smaller and takes up a lot less space than a beach ball. So volume is its size. So elements. An element is a pure substance that cannot be broken down into simpler substances. An element is the most basic form of a substance. A pure substance is made up of only one thing. So if you have an element, it is that one substance all the way through. There's nothing else in it. And elements are made up of one type of atom. So everything in the world is made up of these tiny little particles that you have to use a really strong microscope to see, but they're called atoms, and they are the basic building block of everything in our universe. When we have an element, there's just one type of atom. So if you have a chunk of pure gold, every atom in that chunk of gold is the exact same as all the other ones. They're all gold. So atoms are the basic little particles that everything in the world, everything in the universe is made up of, and that there's only one type, we call that an element. Okay. Next is the periodic table. You might have seen this on posters. There's a copy in your planner. It's basically that rectangular chart, has a bunch of boxes and a bunch of letters in it. And we're going to learn a little bit about that this year. So the periodic table shows all of the elements in the universe. So if it's an element and it exists, it is in the periodic table. Only elements are included. So if you're looking up a substance and it's not in the periodic table, then it's not an element. If it's in the periodic table, it's definitely an element. So only elements are allowed on the periodic table. So in the periodic table, we know it's made of one kind of atom. So remember, elements are made up of one type of atom. They can't be broken down into individual parts. It's one type of atom. If it's in the periodic table, we know it's an element, because only elements are included. So we know that everything on the periodic table in that chart, everything in that is made up of one type of atom. Next, all matter in the universe is made up of elements. So everything around us, everything in space, everything on other planets, everything in the sun, it's all made of elements. Elements join together in combinations to make up everything. So you, trees, air, rocks, the sun, other planets, everything in the universe is made up of different combinations of elements. So they fit together and change and move from one thing to another, but it's all elements and they make up everything. There are 118 total elements, but only 92 of those are actually found in the world, in the real world. So 92 of the elements on the periodic table, if you look numbers 1 through 92, those are all found somewhere on Earth or somewhere in the universe. The rest are made up by scientists in labs. They have to be made artificially. And then lastly is chemical symbol. All elements are represented by a chemical symbol. So if you look at the periodic table, which we will in class, all those letters that are in that chart are the chemical symbols. And it's the one or two letters that you see on the periodic table. And this is how we represent the elements, how we can talk about them and make things easier to understand by using the chemical symbol. So some of them are one letter, like this stands for hydrogen, which is H. Makes sense, hydrogen starts with an H, so its symbol is H. Some of them are two letters. So this is the symbol for helium, He. Helium starts with He, so its symbol is He. These are pretty straightforward, one or two letters that start the words, the letters that are in the word. Some of the symbols are not they don't make a lot of sense. So Fe, this is the symbol for iron. There's not an F or an E in iron. It's because it's based on the Latin word. These are tend to be old elements that people a long time ago were able to find easily. So people back in ancient times were able to find iron, and so they had a Latin word for it, and that's why the symbol for Latin is Fe. Similarly, lead is Pb, because it's based on a Latin word. So some of the symbols make a lot of sense, some of them don't, and you just kind of have to know the difference. When you're writing a chemical symbol, you always capitalize only the first letter. So you look at all of these, only the first letter is capitalized. The second letter is always lowercase. And you never write it in cursive. It will always be printed so people can read it and understand it better.